Hello. So in this episode of Writing Notes, we're going to talk about the Annotated Bibliography. So the Annotated Bibliography is a very fluid form because there aren't any hard and fast rules about them. People do them in very different ways, in part because it's not necessarily a formal document. It's usually a research tool that people use in order to make their lives easier and in order to make it easier to keep track of the research that you're doing. Now, if you're doing a very small amount of research, say you're doing a 2 to 3 page paper for a composition course, and you've only got, say, 3 sources, it may be very easy to keep track of your research. But if you're doing a larger thing, like say you're doing a senior thesis, a master's thesis, a doctoral dissertation, or a book, you are going to have a lot of sources. I mean, for my doctoral dissertation, I think I had like 120 sources and things like this. And so an annotated bibliography is a useful research tool for keeping track of what your sources say. So, what is an annotated bibliography? Basically, it's a modified works cited list. So, in English we use MLA format, and so my entries here are in MLA, but you could do this obviously in APA, Chicago style, Harvard style, Oxford style, whatever it is. Any citation style, you can do this, and it's perfectly fine. So the first thing, as always with a works cited page, is you want to list your works cited entries in alphabetical order. So each source. This is Leanne Carroll's Pomo Blues, Stories from First Year Composition. It's alphabetically the first of the 3 that I'm going to show you. And then what you do after that is you write what we call an annotation. And that's a very vague term, but basically an annotation is a short description of the source and its argument. This is where there's a lot of variation, because some people have very specific ways that they like to do this, and some people take a more sort of haphazard approach where they write down whatever they think is important. Some people will identify important quotes or important pages. Some people will be very specific and get like really deep into the nitty-gritty of what is useful about a particular source, and some people are more broad about it. So I'm going to give you my basic formula, which includes 4 stages, 4 things that an annotation should do. So the first thing is a basic overview, 1 to 2 sentences about the source's main argument. So here's what this source does. Here's what this source says. So in this case, Carroll describes how she's brought postmodern theories, especially of linguistics, into her composition classroom in order to challenge students thinking about the role of narrative in how they see the world, how we see the world. So that's the basic thing that this source does. The next thing that I do, or the next 2 things that I do, 2 interconnected things, is I identify strengths and weaknesses of the source. So what does it do well? What's effective about this particular source? So in this case, it provides a new and innovative way to use postmodern theory to challenge meta-narratives. A weakness is that it begins with a different research question than mine, which means I'll have to use it carefully. And I was actually using this for a specific project, so I did have a research question at the time. But the reason this approach of strengths and weaknesses is useful is because this gets me thinking critically about the quality of the source. And that's always something that you want to do in your research, is you want to be figuring out what's working well, what's not working, what do you want to be aware of in terms of potential successes and potential problems. And then the last thing that I do for my annotations is I talk about what I'm going to get out of this source. So in this case, I intend to pull certain ideas from this article, but it won't be a major source for me. So this is a useful stage in the annotation because it helps you think about how to incorporate the information from this argument, and it helps you assess how useful it's going to be. So these are my 4 things that I do, and I've done the same thing here with Peter Elbow's Embracing Contraries in the Teaching Process, and then Slavoj Žižek's book The Puppet and the Dwarf. Again, all of these were sources that I used for this project, and for this annotated bibliography I've done the same set of 4 things for each entry. So what is the overall argument this source is making? What are the strengths of it? What are the weaknesses of it? And how useful is it going to be for me, or how am I anticipating incorporating it into my project? So again, everybody has a different approach to annotated bibliographies. This is the way that I do it, and I think this is a good basic approach to this research tool.